Fox News Podcasts presents the Bret Baier Podcast with Fox News Chief Political Anchor Bret Baier.
Following a landmark Supreme Court decision that opened the door to mid-decade redistricting, we may see the American map being redrawn in states like Tennessee, Alabama, Louisiana. As we watch these battles play out, it raises a much larger, more fundamental question in a nation that feels increasingly defined by how we are divided. What is it that still holds us together? I have a new book out, The Case for America. I argue that our national identity isn't found in the lines we draw on a map, but in the ideals we drew up in 1776. But there's a lot to talk about in the news. Joining me, my guest for today, host of Making Money with Charles Payne on Fox Business, Charles Payne, and anchor of The Story on the Fox News channel, Martha MacCallum. Good to see you guys.
Good to be here.
You know, we were talking earlier about Secretary Rubio and his tour de force in this White House briefing. You know, he is taking a crucial role in all of this, and you wonder what that's going to lead to.
Clearly. I always think back to when we covered that original GOP primary debate. You had all of those guys up on stage, right? And he's the only one who politically survived that whole process, right? You can look at Bush and Christie and all of them, kind of falling by the wayside over the years. Some of them are still in the Senate and all of that. But the fact that Marco Rubio really has just gotten better and better at perfecting who he is, what his job is, what his skill set is, and the confidence that you see in him over all those years, I think has been a really interesting political story to watch. Remember, he and Trump went at it big time. Big time. Remember the hands and all that stuff?
Yeah,
hard to forget, right?
Marco.
Exactly. They got into the mud, and now they have this clearly very respectful relationship of each other's strengths, and it sets up a pretty interesting question for 2028 when you look at J.D. Vance, the vice president, who has taken a different stance on the war. I think he's sort of kept it a little bit at arm's length, but is supportive of what the president is doing. And then Rubio, who's all in. So I think when you get to the turning point here, how the war ended up going for us will be very interesting in terms of how that factors in.
Yeah. I mean, think of that evolution. He did the Republican response where he's grabbing for the water.
Exactly.
Remember that?
Yes.
It's been
remarkable. Today he did an amazing job this week in that news
Charles,
conference.
when we hear the president say, after this is done, oil's going to drop, the economy's going to boom, and you hear the left say, yeah, we've heard it before. But you do see indications that this economy has been pretty resilient.
It really has been absolutely remarkable, starting with manufacturing. January, the biggest manufacturing data out there, the ISM manufacturing number popped to 52. Anything above 50 is expansion. Anything below is contraction. I think December's number is like 45 something. I mean, it's just it was a dramatic jump, and it stayed there. It's still 52 and 53, 54. It's just absolutely remarkable. Factory orders came in this week 3 times better than what Wall Street anticipated. You've got companies, this earnings season, corporate earnings season, arguably one of the best ever.
Really?
One of the best ever. I think something like 69% of companies have beaten the street, and by large numbers. Of course, we've got all this onshoring going on. These factories, these gigafactories, these massive factories, the data center stuff is just absolutely mind-boggling.
And this is in the face of the headwinds of tariffs that we're going to be we're not going to survive the tariff thing. And then the Iran war, and we were not going to survive the oil prices and the inflation from it. And that's in the face of all of that.
It is. I think the one thing that folks got wrong with the tariff thing, and I thought it was so weird from the very beginning, it's just because you're a historian. You go back and you just look at history. People were comparing it, saying, well, Smoot-Hawley. And the problem is you have to go back further to the Roaring 20s. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of tariffs in the 20s. I don't think people realize that. We had a Tariff Act in 1920, then another one in 1921. The Roaring 20s were accompanied by tariffs. Why? Because we were in the throes of the Second Industrial Revolution. You had Henry Ford, the automobile. And that was one of the greatest periods, that 10-year period of shared prosperity. And we were able to keep foreign competition from undercutting us on certain things. The problem with it was so successful that when Republicans ran for office in the early 30s, it was selective before. Everyone, it became a Christmas tree. So we had tariffs on everything. And guess what? All these other nations retaliated. Well, we knew this time around there wasn't going to be massive retaliation because our dynamic with other countries is much different. We are by far the largest economy in the world. It was more comparable back in the 1930s. And so you had this deflationary spiral, which was also the thing that was crazy. Everyone's saying, well, inflation, inflation, inflation. Smoot-Hawley triggered the greatest deflationary death spiral in the history of this country. Because one day if an apple cost $1, you knew tomorrow it was going to cost 99 cents and the next day 98 cents. And that's what happens. And by the way, that's much more deleterious to our economy than inflation. We can deal with inflation, believe it or not, better than a deflationary death spiral. So it's been remarkable. It hasn't been surprising. It was getting that big, beautiful bill through was phenomenal. And now the tax breaks that these companies get for coming and building over here, the money that people are allowed to keep from their wages. Oil prices are starting to hit. You know, they're starting the gasoline prices are starting to hit. Obviously, the lower economic rungs, and that also maybe gets to our K-shaped economy as well. It's what's kind of masks some of the pain. If 20% of the households can do 50% of the purchasing, overall, you look at look at the retail sales number. It was fantastic. In there is some pain. I'm not going to sit here and say that there aren't a lot of Americans who aren't feeling higher gas prices, but the overall number is absolutely phenomenal. And if this is resolved soon, I'd say sometime before midsummer, we could see a year-end boom that everyone will feel positive about.
Which they are praying for, Martha, because they could change the political dynamic ahead of November. I mean, really, they kind of have to get out of the Iran war one way or another before people leave for family vacation in summer, because it starts to get baked in the cake.
Well, I thought what Secretary Rubio said today was really important with regard to what's going on in the Strait. I mean, you have the representatives of the Iranian government referring to the new regime that controls the Strait. They're basically saying, so we came in, and as Rubio said, we're going to lay mines in the Strait, and we're going to control it. We're going to charge you $2 million if you want to come through to get your vessel through. This should outrage the entire world and everyone who uses that strait. It should be absolutely inflaming to every single country that uses that strait. But what's happening? They're sort of sitting back and, I guess the United States is going to figure this out. Let them figure it out. And UK says, we'll come in and help. You know, once you guys get it all settled, we'll come in and help to patrol the straits. But what I think President Trump has wanted all along is to have sort of an armada of all the nations saying, this is an international waterway. You're a criminal. You cannot do this. You cannot shut it down, and you can't mine it. I mean, if they put mines, in New York Harbor and tried to block us in or block us out, it would be an outrage. But because Iran controls, one side, I think there's like 9 countries that have water on that entire waterway. So it is an outrage. And I think that issue obviously needs to be solved. But this is the ancillary issue. I remember President Trump saying once, I think it was when you and I, Bret, were together on a State of the Union lunch maybe a year ago, when we were asking even then, what's going to happen with Iran? Is anybody going to knock that regime over? And he's like, you got to be careful with war because you never know where it goes.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to take a quick pause here. We'll be back after this.
Yeah, he knew that.
This is very true.
And he knows that.
And we'll see what happens. But I don't know if you can turn this spigot off on this thing by the middle of the summer. And I don't think anything really changes unless you get rid of this regime. I don't see how anything really changes or how you get a deal with them that is actually satisfactory or longstanding.
You have the Iranian president going to X today saying that he thought it was immensely stupid that the IRGC fired missiles at UAE. This is the sitting Iranian president with the foreign minister who's doing the negotiation, but the IRGC is the one firing the missiles. I agree with you. I thought Rubio, when he said, if we let them do this, control that strait, there are 6 other straits and waterways that some other country is going to control, and they're going to say, well, you did it in Iran. Iran did it. Yeah. It's fine.
Exactly.
And so that's a big deal. So this book, that I've done, The Case for America, is basically laying this case out in front of a jury ahead of the 250th. And so what I asked people along the way is, what would you say is the case for America from your point of view? Like, if you're making that case, like, how would you do it?
I would probably start and borrow from Tocqueville. I always think that was just so remarkable because, he came here to study our prison system. I think he was going to stay a few months. He ended up staying a few years. And he goes back to Europe and he says, this American democracy thing is different. It's like, everyone I met that I ran into thought they could be something they weren't born into. But they were offended by this. It wasn't that he was inspired by it, but although later on he sort of laid out, eventually this is what rulers are probably all going to have to deal with, a liberated people who think more highly of themselves. If your father was a chef, doesn't mean you have to be a chef or a blacksmith or whatever that is. And then I would just also think, and I think people need to understand, 250 is short in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, young.
Right? Very, very young. Maybe a baby Huey. Sometimes we don't know our strength, right? We're kind of bouncing around in this thing and not knowing just how powerful we are. One thing I've been talking about a lot for the last couple of years, especially now, is this fourth industrial revolution, because it reminds me so much of the second industrial revolution. Right after the Civil War, 1850, 60. We're at the bottom of the rankings. The UK is at the top. And we take this second industrial revolution, begins with the rails, but also begins with innovative financing. Those folks they call the robber barons, who actually, at the 50 years later, we have shared prosperity. We have the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. Ironically, we had a panic that year, which is the same as a depression, but we also sort of unveiled this thing called consumer discretionary spending. We had shared prosperity that was ushered in this country by the way our system is designed. And so what are we looking at right now? The hottest, biggest, strongest, most important companies in the world are all American. The NVIDIAs, the Metas, the SpaceXs, all of those are U.S. companies. So all of this goes back to the ethos of America. It's based on religious freedom, individualism, but as a unit, we just have been so powerful together, despite our differences, despite the fact that it seems like we're always at each other's throats.
Yeah.
We are unified in the sense that we share this common backdrop that the founders were so brilliant. Most of them were philosophers or studied philosophy. All of them knew world history, and a lot of them were scientists. It's not a mistake that so many inventions were created here. It's not a mistake. Think about Ben Franklin and the kite and all this. It's not a mistake, and it's a wonderful thing when we're reminded that we all can share in this and benefit from it. And that's what I try to do more and more. And I think that's the case for America, is that America has set the pace, has changed the course of world history, of humankind, where now people wake up in other countries thinking they can be something that maybe their parents weren't. But that all emanated from this country.
Yeah, that's right. Resilient, forward-leaning, optimistic. You've written about veterans and what they put on the line in World War II, and that's part of the case too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you wrote this book, Bret, because I do think that people forget where we came from. I think the 250 is an opportunity for us to go back to that and talk about it. I think Charles makes a great point about the class system that exists in other countries that never existed quite the same way here, that anyone can succeed. I mean, you meet, in our work, we meet millionaires, billionaires, so many of these people are inspiring. If you take the time to get past that and talk to them about how they did it, and that they came from nothing in this country. I think that one of the things that we've spent a few years getting away from is that we tried to put everybody back in boxes again with diversity, equity, inclusion, everything got a name in front of it, like you're an Italian American, you're an Asian American, you're a Black American, you're a woman, you're this, all this sort of discussion that is so antithetical to what the country was founded on, which was that everyone is equal. Everyone has opportunity. Now, there were things that we had to straighten out about that from the original founders, and we've worked on them. As you say, we've become more perfect over time. But I think merit is the key to the American system. hard work and merit to success, and that everybody has that opportunity. I think that's something that we need to continue to remind ourselves of and get back to over and over again. And I think this anniversary is a great opportunity for that. And I think your book's a great starting point for it, Bret.
Thanks. I think I tell my kids, if you hustle, you can beat 99% of the people out
That's
there.
right.
Just got to hustle.
I tell mine the same thing.
Just got to hustle.
You really
We got
do.
a room of hustlers here.
That's it. Thanks, guys. Now for a bit of history. May 5th, 1961, Alan Shepard sat atop the Redstone rocket and famously told Mission Control, "Why don't you fix your little problem and light this candle?" Though his flight in the Freedom 7 lasted only 15 minutes, reached 116 miles high, he launched into history as the first American in space. Shepard's journey didn't end there. Despite a medical condition that grounded him for years, his resilience led him back to the stars a decade later to walk on the moon during Apollo 14. That'll do it for this week. You can hear more of this series at foxnewspodcast.com, wherever you download podcasts. Make sure to leave a rating and a review. We want to hear from you. You can buy my book, The Case for America, an argument on behalf of our nation, anywhere you get books. For Charles, Martha, and me, Bret Baier. We'll see you next time.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.